So we'll run, I mean, I'm sure many of you would have attended our talk yesterday. So what we'll try to do is kind of try and do all that we spoke about in a more practical sense. So since we are talking about human AI collaboration at a higher level, what we're going to do is start looking at how we simplify API testing first by helping you understand how you can build tests on API or our platform called QAPI, how you can use AI to kind of build the assertions and so on, save them, then generate a workflow out of them, do integration testing, then look at how we can do performance testing and so on. And why this part is important is this is what is going to feed into AI. So then we'll switch to AI and how we can kind of leverage what we have done as humans, point whatever you build here to the AI, and then go to GitHub, make some code, like some code changes, how we do the configurations and so on, so that AI can take a look at that particular repo or the workspace as we call it. And then when we change any code, then it will pick up and then run the tests that are necessary. Kind of that's the workflow that we're going to do. So first, we are going to focus on how to build API tests in a very rapid manner, and then turn them into performance and workflows, and then get into AI. We would prefer you to try this hands-on because all this is leading to a raffle that we're running. So it's very easy, it will not take a lot of your time. You can basically follow the instructions while we go through it. And then there is, we'll also show you a site where the instructions for raffle are given. So if you build one of your APIs, there's one specific API, which we call it raffle entry. So if you make a post call to that, we will pick a winner probably at 1 o'clock today. The winner is going to get Ray-Ban Meta Smart Glasses as the award. And then there is also, if you build more than 5 odd APIs of your choice or whatever you think of, preferably the APIs that you are building. So I don't know how many of your developers and testers, maybe a raise of hand would help. How many of you are like into quality, API quality? Okay, perfect. Yeah, there's a few folks, great. So perfect. So I'm joined by Puneet. Puneet is our lead platform engineer who is instrumental in building all this stuff. So he'll walk us through all the parts of how to set up, how to run, how to import, the whole life cycle of how we can start building APIs, tests pretty rapidly, right? And then we'll switch over to AI. So over to you, Puneet.
Thank you. Hey everyone. So to get started, you can just go into qapi.kairos.com and you can go and register into this. You can either use Google, your LinkedIn account, or go and create it with your email ID, right? So once you sign in, what you end up is on this space which we call as workspace. Workspace is where you can come and create your own space of where you want to build your APIs, where you want to manage them, arrange them, and all of that. Now there are 2 ways to create a workspace. One is you can create a workspace for yourself, which is like if you're working alone, right? And there is another way where you can create a shared workspace where you can have your team members collaborate, right? So there are these 2 options. So let's say you want to create a private workspace. Right, so once you create your private workspace, you can go into it. So we have 3 things in the home, right? One is a playground, one is an API testing test suite, and API workflow. I'll cover them one by one. So what is playground, right? Playground is a place where, so let's say if you're a developer or a tester, right? You are working on trying to test an API or trying to see if an API functions or what. So what you can do is you can quickly come over here without the hassle of worrying about if you want to arrange APIs and all of that. Come and go and add APIs over here. So there are multiple ways in which how you can onboard your APIs. Right, so you can import them.
So please try this on the laptops. It will not work on the phone, so I'm just letting everyone know. Because once you land here, it's a full-fledged experience, so the phone might not be the right place to kind of right way to kind of do this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So you have multiple ways of how you can onboard your APIs. You can import URLs if you have existing OpenAI specifications, OpenAPI specifications. You can use that. If you have an existing Postman collection URL, you can use that. If you have your WSDL specifications, which are your SOAP APIs, you can use that. Or you can go and create them manually as well. We support REST, SOAP, and GraphQL as well. You can also upload your files if you have a Swagger JSON file, if you have a Postman collection file, or WSDL specification file, right? So I have a file handy with me and I'll be using that. So let's say I have a Swagger JSON that I will be onboarding onto this. So the moment you provide your file and say continue, it's going to list down all the APIs available in your OpenAI specification, right? So you have the option to select all endpoints and onboard, or you want to be very selective. I want to be very selective, so I'll say just open just onboard the application one, right? So I'll say add to test. So once I do that, it takes the APIs and it adds it to my playground, right? So now if you see, all the details on these APIs are pre-filled from my OpenAI specification. Uh, so be it the request headers, request parameters, request body, and all of it, right? So we have multiple. If you want to choose to provide authentication, you have an option to provide different sort of authentication, basic auth, OAuth 2, or you can provide them generally using headers. We also have option to provide different types of body. You can upload a file, or you have form encoded, URL encoded form data, and all of the different options. So this is the part where you have test cases. So adding an API and checking whether it runs is good. Getting a 200 success on it is good, but you're essentially testing an API when it has test cases, when you are trying to understand, okay, so if I give X and it gives me back X, or if I give X, should it give me the expected response, right? So that is the kind of testing that we're looking at. And you have different ways, and we have categorized them into different options, right? First one being response test cases, right? So you can check whether the status code, for example, I might want to do positive testing where I want to check the status code gives me 200. For a negative scenario where I'm giving wrong data, it should give me 500 or 400 series, right? I might want to assert that the response size should not exceed certain number, right? And I would also want to assert my response times, like I should not exceed, let's say, 500 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, depending your application. So you can configure all of that and just provide a value. It's very easy. You just have different options that you can select from and you can use it, right? You have header test cases where you can go and specify different header options. Like let's say we already have preloaded standards, but you can go and type something custom that your application also supports, right? So let's say content type. So I can go and add all the different content type headers, right? Apart from that, we also, if you want to get down to the finer details, right? Let's say you want to go down to the API response and you want to assert whether a status field is present. What is the value of the status field? What is the value of an ID field? What is the value of any other field for that matter? You can go down to that, right? Now, for some people, going and building these JSON paths might become technical in nature. So we have utilities available in all of these places that you can use to kind of build these JSON paths, which I'll touch upon in a moment. Body test cases, you might want to assert whether my body contains certain fields where you don't want to be very specific on the structure, but just certain content, right? JavaScript, now there might also be scenarios where you want to be very specific and very custom to certain, certain types of assertions. You might want to do some data transformation. You might want to, write some code to figure something out or make some calls. You can do all of that using JavaScript assertions. Schema validations is very important because your a very important aspect of APIs that you build are the contract that it has to follow, right? So it has to follow a certain schema, and it has to maintain, for example, an ID field should not be anything apart from an integer, and status field should not be anything apart from an enum, right? All of those kind of strict validations can be enforced using schema validation. Now, for a user who feels this to be done without having to write a single line of code sometimes might be overwhelming. So we also have an option to generate all of this via AI, right? So what I'll get to right now is you have multiple options to run this. So on the playground, you can just say send. Sorry, just give me a moment. Yep. So my API is working fine. Now what I can do is I can take this API, and if I want to build test cases, I can go into path extractors, just paste my JSON and say, give me the JSON paths. So it also gives you all the JSON paths that you can take and add into your assertions, right? Now coming to the AI aspect of it, now let's say I have my API running and I want to build test cases. So I will just click over here. This is our Nova AI, which is our AI agent to help you build and generate test cases. right? So it kind of gave me all the test cases that it feels is necessary based on my API, my response, and my specification. So if you see there are multiple different headers, now you have the option to select all or be very selective in the assertions that you want to add. For example, I want to assert, okay, I want to make sure that this is there, I want to make sure this is there, and I want to make sure this is there, right? And then let's go into JSON path. So it gave you these two. I want to ensure that every time I create an application, the status is always draft. So I can just say select this. Body test case to ensure, okay, it has certain fields. Then comes to schema, right? So in case building a schema or you don't get a schema from your development team, it becomes very difficult for you to go and generate one. So we kind of give you that out of the box. Now you can go and customize this, make it more stringent, add more rules and all of those kind of things that you want to do. It already gives you all of that out of the box, but if you want to make it more complex, you can always do that. So I'll select this as well and I'll say add test case to API. So now if you look at it, it has all my test cases that I have selected, right? So I can go and send this. And it works. So now what I can do is playground is where I can add all the APIs. Right now for me to manage these APIs, categorize them, arrange them into suits for how you can test them categorically, we have an option called as test suits, right? So here what I can do is I can go and create a new suit. Let's say API days. And here you have an option to add API. There are multiple ways that you can add API here as well. One, the standard options that we saw earlier on the playground. Apart from that, you can select the APIs that are already in your playground. So I'll select one from here and I'll say add to suit. Right, so if you see my APIs that was present in my playground has been added over here along with all the test cases. So I have multiple options. Preview is for me to check a quick glance of the API whether it's working or not, right? Execute for me is an option where I can trigger this and it gives me a validation of all my test cases. So once I do this, it takes you to a reports page where you can go and see that the API is already completed executing and it's just generating reports. So it's pretty quick. It's on cloud. Everything's running on cloud, right? And yeah, so these are our reports. So if you can see, it says passed, how many failed. It gives you all the test cases that you have. For example, let's say I added these that I want expected versus actual. I wanted this to have draft. I wanted the status to always have draft value. I wanted the schema to be valid, and also gives you what was your response body and your request body along with your response headers that you can probably use to debug if there was a problem, right? So that's a very quick way of getting started with AI and helping you build assertions without having the need to actually have a knowledge of how to build assertions, right? Now coming back to the test suits, right? So I built a functional test. Now the beautiful part is that if I want to quickly check a performance for this test, how quickly can I convert this into a performance execution, right? I can just select this option and I have multiple options over here. I have option to run it as a functional run, a performance run, a scheduled test, right? I can schedule this test to run every hour, every day, every minute, or run it on a specific duration, right? So I can do all of those options. Now let me say performance. Now the moment I click on performance, I can easily simulate multiple threads, right? I can say load this for 50 users, load this for 10 users, load it for 100 users, 1,000 users, 10,000 users. So that cap depends on the number of virtual user balance. So we have a concept of virtual user balance, which is the amount of users that are loaded onto your wallet that you can use to simulate multiple users, right? So let's say execute. So it's already completed execution and it's done. So since it's on cloud, it's pretty fast. Yeah, so your performance, you don't have to worry about having an infrastructure, you don't have to worry about running it, you don't have to worry about setting up anything. It's just as simple as that, right? So here you can get a complete information of, okay, what were each APIs, what are the response time of each and every APIs that you had, what are the status code of each and every APIs that you had, and you can check in two views. One is your response time views, one is your status code views. Apart from that, we also offer certain advanced metrics that help you understand various information about your APIs, like response time latencies, average threads, hits per second, transactions per second, and all of these other things, right? So that was functional and performance APIs. Now, so building function, just to summarize, we have an option to easily come and onboard and start functional, convert that functional into a performance run without having to do anything else. Now what happens is essentially any test that you build or any user journey that typically happens is nothing but multiple APIs chained one after the other, right? For example, let's say I log in, the access tokens that you get after logging in is used to authenticate all the different APIs. You get certain information from that API. That information is then used to call another API to get other details, right? So these are nothing but chained APIs, which we call as workflows, right? So what we have is something called as API workflow. What this helps is this helps a user to simulate an entire user journey purely from a backend API standpoint, right? Now, I'll quickly show you something that I already have in the interest of time. So, what I've done over here is that I have certain APIs from my existing specification, which is login, create an application. This is a a sample loan application, right? Creating a loan application, getting the loan information, getting the application that is created, triggering risk assessment for that application, and then making sure that the application status changes to application under review, right? So after adding all of these APIs, I go into the workflow aspect of it, right? What you can do is you can drag and drop all these APIs onto the canvas. So if you see, I've already done that. Yeah. So I have multiple APIs. I have a login API, I have a create API, I have a get application, trigger assessment, and submit application, right? So this is an entire process what happens when a user tries to create a loan application. Now, all these APIs can further be connected by passing the inputs. For example, my primary API over here would be create application because everything else that I do would be based on that application ID, right? So what I can do is I can say, I want to take a specific input, which is basically the ID. So I have multiple ways in which how I can select parameters. I can say capture the JSON path, capture the response body, capture the X path, capture the Java, or if you want to do some sort of a data transformation on your response and take very selective values like say currency conversion, data conversion, and all of that, you can go and write a custom JavaScript as well, right? You get a function where you have response and headers. You can also take your headers, pass them as well, or take your response directly, right? So I already have certain things connected over here. I'll quickly show you what that is. So I have taken the ID from creating the application, passed it to get the application, then I have triggered the risk assessment, and then I've also submitted the application as well. So now if I want to pass the input to any of the APIs, right? My APIs might have 10, 15 parameters, but I might only want to pass one of them and make one of them as an output from an external source. What I'll have to do is just select the parameters that I want to be driven from an external API, and once you save that, it is available on the canvas, right? So now you can go and drag and drop and connect all of these things for it to pass the data. So once this is done, you have a workflow, you have an entire user journey. So when you want to run them, you have two options. You have a way where you can run them as a functional test, which is just simulating a user journey, or the best part is that you can now simulate this entire user journey with multiple threads. So I can say run as functional or run as performance. When I say run as performance, an entire user journey can now be triggered as a performance execution with independent threads, which simulates multiple users trying to go through the flow at the same time, right? Which is pretty critical in a lot of the applications today. So I can just say select the number of threads that I want and say execute. So all of this runs on cloud. Is pretty fast. I already have a couple of tests already handy with me, so I'll kind of show you the reports. This is a standard functional report where it shows you how many passed, how many failed, how many didn't have test cases. So I'll just go into view. So you can see all the APIs that were executed. It also, the warning symbol shows you that these APIs didn't essentially have any test cases, right? The tick symbol shows you that it's passed, and a failure would be shown with a red symbol, right? So if you can see, let me pick one of them which has test cases. So yeah, I have multiple different test cases. So I have a header test case, I have body test case, I have JSON path assertions, right? So JSON path, and then I also have regular expressions where I want to ensure that the ID that I get follows a certain standard, right? We have UUIDs, we have TSIDs, and all of these things have different standards, which can be represented using regular expressions, right? So again, these are independent API details, then it also shows you what is the average time for your entire workflow to execute, right? So this is on a very functional level. Now coming to performance. So coming to performance, if you see the reports, yeah. So we have certain information. What is the threshold that we configured when we executed? What is the average duration of each of those threads? So an average time of what a user spent to complete the entire journey from an API standpoint, the total duration that it took to complete it, right? So each thread level details. So you get a graphical view of the entire workflow, how it went through. Now, if you want to see what each and every API in the entire workflow, how much time did it take, how did it go through the entire workflow, you can say API level details. So then you get information of what are the response time for each and every API within that workflow. Now you can go down to a finer level of information, which is thread details. So each and every API in that independent thread can be seen over here. You can see the response of them. You can see status code, response times to kind of debug and see if there are any kind of issues or deviates from your standard expectation. Now the test that I ran also failed, right? The reason being, what I wanted to show you is that whenever you trigger a test, you have an option to set a threshold. I can say that my average workflow duration should not be more than 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 20 seconds, right? So if you see what has happened is I have set my average duration over here to be threshold to be 25 seconds earlier, and what I have set and what I have set over here is 1 second, right? So it showed that my average duration far exceeded my threshold. So these are very important metrics that helps us understand where our APIs are, how are they going to help, how are they going to enhance the user experience. So that was about API process. Right. So we saw workflows. Now, what happens in general is a lot of times the QA guys or the developers kind of have to go through a lot of APIs to figure out what API is connecting where. Right. It becomes very tedious, or for them to go and create a document to provide to someone. We have an extension that's called API Discovery that helps us easily figure this out. So I'll be using one of our sample applications to kind of demonstrate this feature. So I already have the extension installed, and I'm just going to open it. So you can open your developer tools, and it's available right on the bottom after you install the extension. It's called Kairos API Discovery, right? You have to log in, provide your credentials of the application, and then sign up. So once, I'll just take this out of the picture to make it better. Right, so let's say I start recording the user journey. So I'll say select customer, login as a customer, sign in, and create a new application. So if you see, there are a series of APIs that are being called, right? So our API discovery extension kind of captures all of this data. It figures out what are the different connections, what is calling what is linked to what are the parameters being consumed from one API, what is it being sent to, and it creates a visual graph that user can see and try to understand how is the data being flown, right? So if I can, so if you see, yeah. So if you see, it shows you that this is the login API. If it's visible. So this is a login API. It takes in data from here, passes to all the other APIs which are part, which gives you the loan details, application details, creates application, all of the other information, right? So it creates a visual representation of how the data is flowing on your application. Now what you can do is you can directly export this, right, into your as in file. You can directly export this as a file, or what you can do is directly export this into your existing workflows, right? So I can close this and I can say stop. Just a second. Yeah, so this exports a JSON that you can come and onboard onto your API process, and then you're good to go. You don't even have to come create an API in the test suite, create an API in the playground. You can just come and upload this and you're good to go to process, right? So it's as simple as that. So yeah. What is one other feature that we also have is, now when you already have APIs in your suite and you're not able to correlate what APIs map to what, we have something called as an auto map. We have something called as an auto map. What auto map does, it takes in, looks at your APIs, looks at the responses, looks at the request parameters, and creates a map of what are the APIs that correlate to each other, and gives you an understanding of what are the APIs that can be added onto the workflow. Just a second. So if you see, it told login is an important one. It didn't consider register because register didn't correlate to any of the APIs, right? So I don't need to register to go and start any of the other operations. I can just log in, get all of these other details using the API. So it automatically highlights all the APIs that it feels essential for a workflow. And you can give it a name and create it. So if you can look at this, it already creates a map of all the APIs that it feels are connected, and uh, 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 yeah, there are quite a few APIs, so it created a bigger map. But yeah. What we also have as another option is now when somebody comes into and looks at the workflow that you already have, right? It becomes very difficult for someone to understand what those APIs are, what that workflow is all about. Because while I'm showing an example of like say 4 or 5 APIs, in general they would have many APIs. You might have 100, 200 APIs, right? For someone to understand what that is, we have a feature called as summarize. So this summarize feature helps you understand what the application is, what it provides you, what the entire workflow is all about, what are the different validations, assertions that you're doing, and what the workflow checks. Right. So this was all about what QAPI is, and I touched upon some of the key features. We'll now move on to SEER.
So any questions from anyone so far? Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Yes. So you have two options to run. Over here, if you see, you have an option to run on cloud and run on local. No problem. So you have two options. One is run on cloud and run on local. If you have APIs that you're building locally or that runs locally, right? You can always select run local and then execute them. So these would run on your local APIs. It was hitting the API with all the metrics, all the data. Yeah. It's just the API. Just the API, yeah. Not the tests. Yeah. Not verifying the tests.
So there is, so there's another thing. So right now, if you see whatever demos that we did are all based on static values. So one is the integration part will help you do with the dynamic values, right? So where you pass things. But what's also interesting is you can also parameterize this with an external file and things like that. So your request and responses, your data that goes in and the assertions that come back, so they can all be um, selectively driven through an external file as well, right? So that way you're not stuck with the same thing. You can only change the data and then run it for the other things. And also, if you look at on the top right, there is configurations. So under configurations, you can see like one, we know that there are tokens that you have to receive and pass for every request. So you don't want to do that all the time. So there is also an option to do prerequisites. We can deal with all kinds of authentications, including certificates. And then you also see the variables part, which is quite interesting because so we don't just simply declare variables. So all the variables are declared under environments. So you have an environment under which the variables go. So when you go run any of your tests across, so and then there is some the automated test data generation as well for all the things synthetic. But so at any time, if you run any test, so the first thing it will ask is against which environment the test has to be run. So you're not like writing that or configuring it inside some test or something, but instead it's just a drop down like run this test against this, next time you can run it against another environment and so on. So that's another thing. So, yes. Right. Right. So yes, so there is, yeah. So we maintain full audit trail of the changes and everything, and you can always link it to your GitHub repo as well. So you can export it from there or import it from there, and then sync or manage it alongside your
So you can
code.
export all of these tests as JSON and manage it in any of your repository. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Right.
no, it's on your laptop. It's on your machine. So it's SaaS by default, but we know some of your, you might be running a local Docker instance where your API is running. So you can also, if you configure all the variables to point it to your local Docker instance, then you change it to local and then run it. So it runs on through the browser on your machine. It doesn't run on the cloud. Right, right. So yeah, so we host, so there are two types of hosting as far as this is concerned. So one is public hosting and a private hosting. So what we are looking at is a public hosting part of it. But if you have some specific data requirement, or sorry, security requirements like that, so I mean the product itself is ISO 27001, SOC 2 Type 2 and GDPR compliant. And then we also run it in a private instance. So where compute network storage can all be running privately. So that way your safety does. So and again, like whatever we are talking about here is something that is available for everyone to try and use it for free, right? So we are not essentially, there's no, obviously there are some limits. There is also a pro plan, but this is something that we're purely focusing on the testing side of things. And also the intent has always been to, as I said yesterday, is to draw more people into the API testing space. We clearly see there's a huge gap that a lot of people who are very good at functional understanding of applications are really not playing a part in the service level testing. So, and we know for a fact that the feedback is very quick. So a typical workflow runs under a minute. So imagine like rather than relying on these massive test suites that people write on the UI front where it takes like hours to run and give a feedback, we thought how do we make it accessible for everyone to kind of go ahead and do it. So sure. So the time it takes, if you have so the larger the APIs get. I mean, the higher the number, the slower it gets, and sometimes the accuracy also plays. No, that's what we say.
Auto map.
Auto
I'll show
mapping.
you.
So we call this auto mapping, where you can point a test suite and
So
say
let's
auto
say I
map.
have a test suite, which I just showed you, which was this, and I say auto map.
Yeah.
So it tells me what are the APIs that it asks, it recommends you to add in the map.
Uh, yeah. So this feature is
This
in
feature is available on the Pro version.
Pro version. Yeah. So anything that is basically probably as we go down the path, anything that is AI heavy is essentially in Pro version. Although we have some limits, like test generation is something that you can do reasonably, but some of these which require some thinking are essentially in the Pro version. Right. Yeah. Right. So yeah. Not necessarily. I mean, see, the success of testing, like leveraging all these values, how well the specs are designed. But since we are also fetching through Postman collections and other things, so we generally avoid. But yeah, specs, the better your specs, the better output it is like.
The path itself has get customer
Right,
or validate customer. Basically you don't have the verb in, you're not supposed,
right,
you shouldn't be having, like that's the
right,
recommendation.
right.
But I mean, we do see endpoints which don't follow the REST guidelines.
Guidelines, yes.
And so, that's where my question was.
So I think the auto mapping part from our perspective, it just doesn't look at the names. I mean, it's less semantic, but more holistic in the sense it looks at the name obviously, but also the request and responses. So we try to make sense with whatever context we get. So I said yes to a part of your question is because the main way through which the APIs appear on this and the tests are built are ideally through specs. So kind of that carries forward right throughout the thing. But yeah, we try and do holistic, like we also get the request and responses. So it only works if you have run it once, so that it knows that there is the request and response. It also tries to make sense from that. So,
Thank you. Makes sense.
Yes.
So that's the JSON.
The intention is if I have a catalog of APIs, right, and there are three different domains within the banking industry, how do I generate a workflow for these three different domains?
So what you can do is, so what would happen is you have these endpoints, right? So let's say one is your staging, one is UAT, one is some other environment, right? You can configure them via your global variables. So every time you run a workflow, you can select which environment you want to run it against, and you can just execute.
No,
them.
but I
You
think
don't
the
have
question
to
is more on the
duplicate
domain side, like lending, cards, or something else, right? Yeah, I think, see, so this is a larger discussion. So what we have certain models called domain lens models. So where we, like whatever, with some of our customers, we have that agreement where we also use that. We work with a lot of fintechs, by the way. So we also use that knowledge to train some of our domain models, which can kind of then come into. But some of these things, as you know, we don't put them on public instances. It's predominantly to the private side of things, because obviously you don't want your data also to get out. Yeah, so we already do through domain lens models, right? So yes, we have already done, especially in the SAP and fintech spaces. So yeah, so
it will access the APIs to your local machine through your browser.
browser.
So we need some agent to be installed on the
Nothing to
machine.
install.
No.
Then how will it access? Because the corporate networks will always block the incoming traffic.
If that API or that server is running on your local machine, it can be accessed by the browser. But if it is within your network, then we have other ways
No,
where.
so like simple thing, right? So let's say you're running a web app, it runs on 8080, localhost 3000.
Localhost slash
Localhost
point. Yep.
30, like localhost 3000. So like the way your browser access localhost 3000 is the same way that we also go to that. See, so the app itself, the browser where the app is running itself makes a call to the local server, but the reports it will send to the cloud, right, where you can see it.
So you need the plugin to be installed on.
Nothing.
No plugin.
So if I go into the browser and say localhost 8080, right, it'll start loading.
Right.
Similarly, whatever is the application that can be accessed by a browser can be accessed over here.
But how will you get access to it? That's the question.
Because this runs on the browser itself.
When
so
you
we
turn
need
the
both the instance to be running on the browser, the SaaS application as well as the local.
So when you select the, see, we have this thing called cloud on the top. So when you select the cloud, so it runs there, and when you select local, it uses the browser to send the request to your locally hosted. So this browser, the local browser.
Okay.
So like the way when you open a 3000 or an 8080, so the way it loads your basic app is the same way it loads your, it calls the API and then gets a response back.
Okay. So the telemetry will be sent to your cloud.
Yes. So the rest, because we have to show the report so that when you log in back, you can see that this was run on local over there. So I also know like some of, so we'll also quickly go through the SEER part of it now. So once, once all of this is built, so what we are essentially now trying to do is try and connect this to your CI. So when you connect it to your CI is essentially where your point, like you're doing two things. One is the standard CI integration where whatever tests are built here quickly can be run as part of your pipelines. Now the second thing that will also help you do is point, so there is another configuration that, and we can walk you through that, is integration. So like there are around 4 agents that we spoke about yesterday, which is sense, evaluate, execute and report. So once you make this configuration, and Puneet will walk us through this, once you make these configurations and you point to one of the actions to this particular workspace, right? So we built everything in a workspace when we started. So once you point it to that, so now the AI knows where your tests are, and there is another AI which basically looks at your code change and then ties these two things together to check if whatever the code change has happened, is it, how to validate that particular code change, right? So that's essentially how this works. So we call this here, and then every time the code change happens, it kind of triggers this, understands the code change, summarizes it, then asks itself a question whether the change that has happened and the tests that I have, are they kind of relevant, are they sufficient? So if yes, it's going to go run them and then report back.
How is it different than integration test cases, integrated in my CI/CD pipeline? And as I go and do a build, from, let's say, my feature branch to my develop branch, and automatically I trigger this regression suit.
Yeah.
So, how is it different than
Right.
that?
Couple of things, right? So one is whatever tests you have, they're there unless, I mean, they're just static. When I say static, I don't mean like static and dynamic. I essentially mean that if there is a change, someone has to go in and write and update that test suite, whatever you have, right? So let's say you added a new API. Unless somebody writes tests for that new API, you will not have the tests. That is number one. Number two, most of the CI approach that we see is like carpet bombing today, right? So you're just running everything that is essential to run, including, when some might call it regression, fine. But it's not focused for that particular change. So it's like, here is all my test suites that I've written, right? And again, we're not just talking about a test, a set of unit tests or integration tests that within a repository that a particular developer might have written. So we are talking about cross environment aspects as well, where you might be looking at your end-to-end tests as well, right? The workflows and everything. So we are looking at it not from a developer's eyes, but from a QA's eyes. So which is like more holistic and end-to-end. So that's kind of another difference, I would say. So when you have such a massive, when they write tests, I mean, there's a very huge amount of tests. So then, I mean, then how will you pick what is the right one given the time? I mean, I cannot keep running this for like 2 hours and then, you know, you only get to know that there was some issue in the first one, right? So one, it is dynamic in nature. It will build if there are no tests. Number two, it is very focused and reasoned based on the change that has happened, as opposed to I running everything no matter what the change is.
How does it build the, like, let's say you're talking about the integration test cases, right, across the system. How will it build? Do you have to provide them the product or the requirement document? Because if it builds out of the code, then it will just judge what developer has provided. So it has to be from the product requirement.
Right.
So how does that build?
So that's a very valid, see, what we are, again, as we said earlier as well, so what we are focusing on here is only one of the context, which is the code as a context. So we have ability to gather context from your Jira and Azure DevOps Rally, wherever you are storing your requirements, the code base. We have agents that connect to Figma. We have agents that connect to your existing tests, like the one that we are going to show today. And we also have anything that you can throw out in terms of documentation, meeting notes, and so on and so forth. So that's the entire context, and not just right while we are discussing about APIs right now. So we also have similar stuff running on UI as well for your JSTS code, right? That exists anywhere else. So we try and combine all this context inside one memory to which these agents talk to. But what we are showing here, you're absolutely right, is whatever it is pointing to, so because see, again, not everyone would be comfortable to share all this context to us, right? I mean, that's kind of the, although no matter how secure we talk about AI is, but some people are still skeptical about what is being done with all the data, right? So it's kind of, it picks only, like right now we're only talking about code, you're right. So its limited understanding is, it looks at the repo and the available APIs in that repo. That's it. It doesn't go beyond your repo. So then if you go beyond your repo, and then that's when, like, there might be hundreds of repos, so every repo has to be configured to like this, and then eventually it will go into memory, and from memory it picks up. So then it kind of writes much more larger end-to-end tests, like what you said, including the user stories and everything. And we also have virtualization agents as well, right? So if your API is not built, we can go and mock it and stuff like that. So we are kind of discussing only the limited part, but that's a very valid point. Sure. But this has to be done for every repo.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not like first pass, it will hit it out of the park, right?
Exactly.
It's like,
it has to initially act like a co-pilot, because, you know, if you pick all of the data from multiple places, correct, and build some context out of it and start writing automation test cases, it has to be approved by the human eye.
Absolutely.
Or the quality engineer.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So so that's what this configuration that we are going to discuss and what is there in this documentation you can all look at is per repo. And then eventually once you have 10, 15, 20 repos, I think, and the user stories, I think that's when it starts making sense. That's when memory gets populated, and that's when, like, you'll see much more impactful. But this in itself, we think, can close a loop at the developer level at a much larger level, right? So let's go to through some of the details. So just so everyone knows, so we only support Java Spring Boot and Python REST API as of now. So we are also working on other language support. So that also tells us that there's no like one agent which does everything. So it has to be done for every single language, right?
Yep. So we have this documentation which is on docs.kairos.com, which kind of helps you configure Seer and start using it. So we have an option to integrate into Java and Python microservices. All the steps of what you'll be needing, for example, what is the entire GitHub action, where you'll have to put it, what are the information secrets that you'll have to configure. All of it have been specified over here, right? So it also tells you where you can get all the data that you'll have to configure for this. So once this is configured, what you can do is every time you can just go into your repository and create that GitHub Actions file, code impact.yaml, and paste the code, and then you can specify the branch that you'd want it to get triggered on. So every time you go and create a pull request on that branch, I've already created one over here. So every time you create a pull request, what it does, it checks your code, it checks for the impact. And what it checks is that, okay, so I might have 50 APIs or 100 APIs in my suite. What are the APIs that might be affected by the changes over here, right? So for example, if I go through this pull request, I have addition of 2 new APIs. I have addition of 2 new APIs, plus I have changes on some existing APIs, right? So it kind of looks at that and then triggers only the required APIs. While we have regression suites and all of it, which has a lot of data, this on a developer level would kind of look at what are the changes that you have done, what are the APIs that it affect, and only triggers that. And the moment it finds issues, or if it finds everything's good to go, it launches or it creates an issue on GitHub, which you can see it over here. Right? So if you look at this, it puts an entire report of the pull request that you created on the and all the tests that it ran to check the impact. So if you can check, it checks it gives you the impact summary of, okay, what are the tests it ran, where it found issues, right? It tells you, okay, these are the APIs that need to be created, these are the new endpoints that have been added, and gives you a complete downloadable HTML report. Okay. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, so we have two versions, right? The one that we have enabled over here is because, like you said, that it's going to be a problem for us to go and update all the APIs every time because it has to be human monitored. So there's version which will auto update it. There's also a version which will not update it but tell you what has to be updated.
So just to confirm, we don't make any changes. We don't update anything. We just tell you, here are the issues that we found. Here are the APIs that are impacted, and here are the tests that we ran along with evidences. So, so you can all try this out. I think we have, this was run 2 days back. I think
Yeah, I'll just trigger off.
yeah. So while we trigger it, you can reach out to us for the key as this is on the AI. So we'll give you the key once you register. So let's quickly the last part, since we're just doing a time check. We'll also walk you through how to enter the raffle so that we know some of. I mean, there's a lot of people who have already entered it, but we'll also kind of show you how to enter the raffle so that you stand a chance to win the smart glasses. We can go through that. And also, there are 2 more $100 vouchers that we have that anyone can win if they run more than 5 API tests on this. So, yeah.
So you guys can log into raffle, raffle.kairos.com. This has all the steps that you'll have to follow. Basically, you need to sign up onto the application, create your workspace, create a suite, add that suite, and add APIs. The APIs that you'd have to add, which is this particular Swagger, which is available in the beginning of it. If you see QAPI raffle Swagger JSON, you can just copy this, add it over here, add the APIs. It has just one single API which is going to give you your entry to raffle. Select that API, enter your details, and you can hit execute. So this would confirm your entry into the raffle. Yeah.
All right. Puneet, Ameet, we have a couple of minutes for a few questions, perhaps.
So yeah,
Any?
so just a quick point. There is event code that is there. So it is Q's in lowercase q and everything else is in uppercase. Q API hyphen days is the event code. So pass the event code in the body and then it will make a, and you'll get a response back if it is submitted successfully. And if not, then it will tell you what is error.
Sorry, go ahead. Awesome. Any more questions? Quite an interesting platform. It's scarily good, I think.
Hi. Regarding the import of the files, right, that you're generating through the specs.
Right.
That's one thing that you have the body and you have all the structure defined where you'll see the test cases like positive and negative.
Right.
But when you do the Postman collection, you don't put those cases.
Right.
You just have the APIs configured in it.
Correct.
How do you get those test cases specific to body and
So we build that by the response that you provide. So basically what happens is before Nova generates test cases, it runs your API to check whether it is working fine. And then once it gives you a 200, that is when it starts building all the test cases.
Yeah, but you don't have the data, right? How are you building the body test cases that you have defined?
No, so a couple of things. One, so there are three ways of importing the API. One is through Swagger spec, hosted or Swagger JSON, Postman collection, or you can key in the details manually. Right. So when the first successful run happens is only like when the call happens and you get a 200 back is only when the AI
so
kicks in.
you are already making an API call before the test case are generated.
Exactly,
Yes.
and then get it. And one more thing is when the Postman part, we just want to highlight one thing and very consciously that when you import Postman collections, we don't import the tests. We only import everything else.
Right. So if we have pre-configured scripts in Postman,
We will
so
not
those
import.
don't get
We
imported.
don't import.
So do you have like that in scope for the future?
No, because there is a reason, and maybe we can do it.
See, I
I'll
mean,
tell
the reason
you.
I'm asking is because like since you have like all the test scripts that were running for a long time and you want to import everything to this
See,
and
fair,
then build an automation, so you can't use the ones that were already running.
Right, fair ask. The reason why, and I mean, maybe some might agree, some might not. The reason why we are not doing this is primarily because one of the things that we saw with many teams, especially on the QA front, is they get the collection from the developers, they take it into their Postman, just run it, and everything passes. They say it's done. Right? They are not really focusing on like being critical about what are the tests that they should be consciously building. So the moment we import the tests, so it's like we're just carrying forward that practice of like, I'll just take it, run whatever the developer has configured and go ahead with it. That's the part that we want to avoid. But yeah, I mean, I think if we get more requests like this, and see, as I said, our target personas, I know it might be a little controversial to say that, but our target personas are QA folks to, and to get them into this, right? But having said that, we're not restricting any developers to use it. There's a lot of benefit for them to use it. But yeah, I mean, I think if we get more ask, and it's a very fair point, right? Because you've been running some tests and why let go of them. Very fair ask. We'll definitely take that into the roadmap, but not sure when we are going to kind of address that.
Thank you. Thanks.
You have another follow-up? Maybe on the side, is it?
Sorry, one more question. Regarding the credentials that we have configured, especially I'm talking about Postman because we use a lot. Now we have configured some API keys or like OAuth2 connections to that one. So do you also store those into your system, or is there a way that we can have a mechanism where whenever you make this test runs, then you can access it from a remote location to run it through?
We can do that. So we have some clients using HashiCorp Vault and AWS Secrets Manager. So
it's possible.
Yeah. So that's where the prerequisite kind comes.
So you have this option of prerequisite APIs where you can
so
configure.
You can call wherever. Yeah.
Any more questions?
So let us know if you guys are not able to enter the raffle. We'll be on the booth the first booth right outside this. Booth 6. Yeah. So thanks everyone for hearing us.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.